Many nosy people ask me, Betty, as a conservative Christian, why are you so obsessed with abortion when Jesus never mentioned it? Not even once. Jesus? What conservative Christian listens to him? No, I am against a woman's right to control her own body because life is precious. Well, unless it's hers. To we conservative Christians, life is always precious without any qualification. Except for that one. Let me be honest for a second. That may not be technically accurate. All lives are precious with one. Okay, two at most. Other exceptions. Life is precious, but healthcare is negotiable. Life is precious until a senator, congressman, or Supreme Court justice's daughter gets pregnant. Life is precious, but not as precious as the guns that end them. Life is precious unless you're wearing a hoodie. Life is precious unless we send a drone as our +1 to your Arabian wedding. Life is precious unless it's ended by someone in a uniform. Unless the dead person was ransacking the Capitol for Mr. Trump, and then it goes back to being precious again. Life is precious unless you forgot to be white. Life is precious unless we're in a rush to execute you. Life is precious by ending my own families by repeating anti-vaccine disinformation from the New England Journal of Facebook. It's freedom, y'all. Life is precious unless it's being lived in a way that doesn't conform to my rigid 1950s concept of gender. Life is precious unless I'm standing my ground over nothing in particular. Life is precious unless you have a disease I don't. Life is precious unless your terminal illness could be cured by a drug I vaguely, even wrongly associate with maybe, I don't know, aborted stem cells, whatever they are. Life is precious unless my son plows his car into a gang of anti-white supremacists. Life is precious until you ask me to wear a mask. Life is precious unless you forget to say Merry Christmas. Life is precious unless you engage in the hobby of being a homosexual. Life is precious unless it's some other person's child who is starving. Life is precious unless your tap water is brown. Life is precious unless you have a pre-existing condition. Life is precious unless it's trying to get over the border. Well, unless it's a northern border, then it goes back to being precious again, but still unwelcome. Life is precious unless you insist on praying to a God who isn't mine. Life is precious unless it's devoured by so-called climate change. Life is precious unless you're homeless and making things unsightly for me. Life is precious, even if we use the majority of our federal budget to buy toys to end them. Life is precious, but funds for food and medicine to keep yours are going to get filibustered. Life is precious, unless an underage white supremacist crosses state lines with an illegal assault rifle to take a couple. Life is precious, unless pastor gets his mistress pregnant again. Okay, so maybe there are more than one or two exceptions to conservative Christians' immutable belief that life is precious. But who's counting? Life is precious. Good luck hanging on to yours in conservative Christian America, because to us, life is precious, but only until you're born. Hark, you may know me on Twitter as Mrs. Betty Bowers, America's best Christian, trademark glory, but the best way to get to know me is on Patreon. Jesus told me that the best way to prove that I have a real Christian ministry is to hit people up for money. So please think about joining us on Patreon.